Hi guys, and welcome to the channel. Hillbilly Military Modeling here, and this video is a continuation of our M-18 Hellcat by Academy in 1/35 scale. This video is the painting portion of our build, so let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot to do. So for a good paint job, we've got a lot of preparation to do. I like to use these alligator clips to hold parts that I can actually clip them onto. And then these tapered wooden dowels, they work really good for road wheels and drive sprockets. And sometimes I just leave the parts on the screws. Just make sure you clean up the edges. I also like to use this low tack painter's tape. Now here I'm folding the edges on it, this painter's mask tape. That way it doesn't curl up on itself, and it's great for holding little parts like, in this case, driver's hatches, so that I don't blow them away with the airbrush. Now I need to cut some thin strips to mask the lower hull. So we're going to take these little thin strips here, and I'm going to use these to mask around the driver's hatches. As you can see, we have a little bit of white in the opening, and I kind of want to leave that detail there. So I'm going to use this thin tape to mask that off and get it adjusted just where we need it. In my point of view, the hatches would have been closed when this vehicle was originally painted, so this would probably still have a slight white outline there. Now for the large opening for the turret, we're going to use this sliced thin sponge. Now this is just a car wash sponge that I use, and we're just going to slide it in place. Now you do want to be careful, just in case there's a lot of interior parts that you might tear off, and you don't want to do that. So going back to our driver and our assistant driver's hatch, we need to keep the deep inside of the interior from overspray, so I'm going to use this cotton ball to do that with. And probably a little piece of paper towel would get the job done just the same. So now we're ready to mix up our color. This is going to be Vallejo German Panzer Gray, and I'm just going to mix it up for my airbrush. Your mixture might be a little bit different than mine, so I'm not going to try to school you on that, but we want to get everything coated. This gives us the opportunity to check and make sure that there's no unwanted ugly spots, glue spots, or seams that we needed to fill that we might have missed. And once we unify this entire surface with this dark color, now you can use NATO black or whatever. In this case, I'm using the Panzer Gray. It's my new black. So don't forget to do your running gear. And we're just going to coat the entire hull with this. And one of the benefits of doing it this way is when we go to use our primary color, which is going to be an OD green, if there's any areas that we actually miss when we paint that, then this dark color is going to act as a shadow for us. Also, it helps for the paint to stick if you put on a light coat and then come back and do your fill coat. Oftentimes I find with this Vallejo paint that I'm using, with my mix for my airbrush, I usually end up doing like 3 coats in order to get everything covered well. So next up, I'm going to actually mask off this front hull plate here. Might be called a breastplate, I forget. But anyway, this allows the servicing of the transmission and steering differential in the front of the vehicle. I kind of want the edges of this to stand out in the paint job a little bit, so they give a little bit more visual detail to it. So I'm going to mask this off, and as you can see here, it's a little difficult to do sometimes. Trying to get the the masking tape straight. And I'm using a toothpick just to press it down on the edges. And so I'm going to mask this off around the plate. And I also cut a couple of strips, which we're going to go ahead and use on the fender extensions. I just don't want the highlight color, the pre-shading color, which was going to be white, to get down into this seam here, this groove. Speaking of which, here we go. This is the Vallejo white acrylic, and we're just going to reduce that for our airbrush. Here I'm going to go ahead and outline that front plate on the vehicle. And then we're going to use the light on high and also light on seams and angles kind of approach. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. First of all, we're going to go ahead and do these corners. And I'm going to set that aside and let that dry for a little bit. And now we're just going to go ahead and use the white on the high portions of the turret and the front of the turret, the weld seam. There's a weld seam here underneath the bustle. We're going to want to get that. And I'm also going to do these racks that are on the side of the turret. And your angle is very important when you do this. That way you don't get overspray somewhere on the turret that you don't want. So you're going to kind of watch that line of sight angle so that you're just hitting the edges of the brackets here. And I do the same thing for these side bustle racks. I just want the top rail to be highlighted. So I'm going to make sure that the rest of the turret is out of the airstream so that only the highlight color hits that top rail. So now we're going to remove our mask tape out from around the front of the vehicle. And if you pull it nice and slow, you shouldn't have any adhesive issues. And now we can go ahead and highlight the rest of the top hull of the vehicle. Now these would just be areas that you want a slightly lighter color, and that's the whole point of pre-shading. So we're going to do all of these joints where the top of the hull changes angle. Now we're going to do down the side. And you probably notice that I do not have the protector cup on my airbrush. The needle you can actually see at the end of it there. This kind of helps us in two ways. One, we can do a much thinner spray. And also, we're going to wipe and clean this tip often with a little bit of piece of paper towel. And that keeps the paint buildup from getting too bad on the actual needle of the airbrush, which can cause, issues. So we want to keep that cleaned off. And you can see here I'm just wiping that off. So what happens is paint builds up on the needle, and then all of a sudden the airbrush will blow off a great big glob of paint. And that's what we're going to avoid by keeping it nice and clean, wiped off. Just be careful you don't stick yourself with it and you don't bend your needle. And here we're just going to do the top of our main armament barrel. That'll be where it's going to get the most weather and the most sun, so it's going to be faded the most there. And here we're going to start the first phase of actually painting canvas. So we're using the same white, and we're just going to paint all the high relief areas that are on this canvas. and trying to keep the I'm trying to keep these lines as thin as possible, but my control of an airbrush, I need a lot more practice with it. So we'll see how this works out. I hope the canvas comes out looking nice. So next up, we're going to use this Model Master Acryl Rust. And this is an acrylic paint. And we're going to paint our tracks with this. And why are we painting our tracks so soon, you might ask? Well, that's because we have some fender extensions and shields that need to go over top of the tracks, which means we actually need to assemble part of the model before we can paint the rest of the exterior. So in order to finish up the track, we're going to take this enamel flat steel by Testors, and we're going to do some dry brushing. Now I think enamels dry brush easier and more consistently than anything else, so that's why I use them. Here we're just going to do the guide teeth on the tracks, and then all the raised relief that's on the track, as well as the connector pins on the ends of the tracks. Now a lot of this is going to be subdued and quite a bit when we start to weather the vehicle with pigments and washes, so I just want to make sure that this detail is still going to be visible underneath all that. Now if you get too much of this flat steel enamel and it's too bright in an area, you can use the enamel thinner on a clean brush and kind of blend that and dull that down some. It's almost impossible to get rid of, but you can adjust it. So that looks pretty good. Alright, on to the next step. So now it's time to mix our OD green. So I am going to use parched grass for our OD green, and I'm going to darken it up with just a little bit of Vallejo black here for a couple of reasons. Number one is that the vehicle is late or mid to late 1944, so it's not going to be that long in service, which means it's going to be newer, brighter green, and also I don't want every OD green vehicle in my collection to be the same shade of OD green. So we're just going to do the bottom portion of the vehicle where we have to install the tracks, and also the inside of the turret. And while we've got the airbrush out, let's go ahead and do all the other small parts here. We're going to do the breech assembly. I'm going to spray the radio, which I'm going to change the color of the radio later, but the bracket needs to be the OD green. And we're going to spray all of our drive sprockets and idlers, and also our road wheels as well. And that'll give them a chance to dry. So next we're going to use XF56 metallic gray from Tamiya. And I'm going to use this on all the wear points on our running gear. So this will be the metal wear points, I should say. This is going to be the teeth on our drive sprockets. And just want to make sure that these areas are covered, as well as our idler. The idler is all metal. There's no rubber on the idler, so we're going to want to make sure that that is also done. And now I'm going to go back in with the Vallejo Panzer Gray with a real thin mixture and clean up all the overspray on our road wheels. So I went back to the parched grass, and this is the color without the darkening, and I'm using that to paint our radio. I would like for the radio to be a slightly different color, and so we're going to throw this on and set that aside and let that dry. While our radio dries, we need to clean up some contact areas here, and this is where the front portion of the turret roof and the rear portion of the turret roof goes. So rubbing alcohol does a real good job of cleaning acrylic paint off of polystyrene. So if you haven't tried it, it works great. There are certain areas like these edges where the roof sections are going to make contact with the turret, that it's much easier to scrape that off with a knife than it is to try to get a Q-tip in there. So now we're going to use that flat steel enamel again, now that the radio is nice and dry, and we're just going to do some dry brushing. This will pull out the details on the radio, put a little bit of wear here and there on it. Now once that dries, we're going to take this Tamiya panel liner. This is the black panel liner, which is also an enamel product. And in these recessed panels, I'm just going to let this panel liner flow around. And that gives us a pretty good look, and I kind of like that, so that's what we're going to do. Next is XF49 khaki for the forehead pad for our gunner on his periscope. And we also need to paint up our ready ammunition. It's going to be in the ready racks in the turret. So this is antique gold craft paint. It's a metallic paint. Little bit of acrylic thinner, and we're just going to brush this on. Now I'm going to end up going back over this and put a second coat on it, but it's a nice bright color. I kind of thinned it a little too much. Now here you can see we've got our radio installed already. Now we're just going to glue down the rear portion of the turret top, or top of the turret, either way, same thing. A little bit of Tamiya extra thin, and now the front portion of the turret top is going to go into place, and we'll glue that down. Now since we cleaned all this up, we shouldn't have any issues with the glue holding the part nice and secure for us. Now there is a spreader bar that holds the canvas top up, which is not included on this model, but the bar is there, so we're going to go ahead and glue that into place. And I do go back and put a little bit of extra thin, just to make sure it stays in place. So now that we've got everything painted up for our running gear, we can go ahead and install our tracks. Now we've already got the lower hull painted where the tracks goes, and so we're going to put these on very carefully and try not to break anything. Last thing we want to do is pull the track apart, which I actually do, and I have to glue back together, but hey, that's the kind of thing that happens when you're modeling. We just accept it and go on. And now, as you can see here, I'm going to show you on this one fender where I have marked and then scraped off the paint. That'll give us a good glue surface for our fenders and covers. And with those in place, now we need to protect our running gear and the lower hull from overspray. So I'm going to put a little bit of tape in those areas right there. And I'm going to also use aluminum foil or aluminium foil, depending upon which side of the pond you're on. And then we're just going to wrap that around our tracks. Now this is just to keep the overspray off. We don't want to damage any of our paint work. So with that side done, we got one more side to do. We also need to protect these items that we painted up and installed inside the turret, like the radio. A couple of little pieces of tape will protect that from overspray. And we need to cover up our periscope and also that ready ammunition in the ready rack. Now with everything safely covered, we can go ahead and finish painting the vehicle with our base OD green color. So the key here is to not wash out your pre-shading. So nice rule of thumb is right before you think that one more coat and it'll be good is when you need to stop, because usually it's that one more coat that subdues your pre-shading so much that it's hardly there. So you really want that to show through. So when you paint this, be very critical and keep the airbrush moving and put these coats on real light. Doesn't matter if you got to go over it 10 times. That's better than doing 3 heavy coats and ruining your pre-shading. So now we're going to work on our canvas, but the first thing we need to do is tape off our main armament barrel here, otherwise known as a gun tube, and protect it from overspray. And I'm just going to go back to the same color that we painted the radio. This is the parched grass, which is my OD green. This is Vallejo. And we spray paint that canvas area. And now we're going to come in with this flat tan, which is an enamel color. And we're just going to dry brush over top of that. Now, just to be sure, to let you know, I do let the acrylic paint dry completely before I try the dry brushing, as we're just going to hit all the high spots here. And as you can see, it looks pretty good. So all we got to do is remove our masking tape, and I'm kind of proud of that. Yeah, you guys let me know in the comments what you think of our canvas mantle here. So with that done, we can go ahead and remove all of our masking for the painting of the lower hull, and get that cotton out of there. And be very careful when you remove your sponge, if that is what you use. Next up is some medium CA glue. Now, our main armament needs to be glued on with this because we're just going to glue this on paint over paint, more or less. So we need to really make sure that we've got the location correct before we stick it, because once it's stuck, you're pretty much stuck with it. So I managed to get it right where I wanted it. And next we're going to glue in these are inclement weather canvas, I don't know what you call them exactly. They're not shields or guards, they're just canvas coverings for the driver and assistant driver. And we're going to glue these into the racks here on the side of the turret. So I did paint the windshield portion of it gray, but as you can see here, you can barely see the very top of it down inside the bracket there. So we just want to make sure that it's seated nice and well there, and we're going to have to glue the other one in too. Now I'm going to use this metallic charcoal gray craft paint. Just kind of thin it out just a little bit, because as you can see here, these craft paints are really thick, but they do brush on nice. We're going to use this for our breech block. And I know there's probably a bunch of people out there that's going to holler, hey, a breech block, it's supposed to be the same color as the color of the exterior of the vehicle. Well, yeah, but when we look down inside this turret, we would like to have a little something to look at. And along with that same theme, I'm going to use this chrome silver here just to paint the pistons that are on the recoil mechanism. So these are like two hydraulic cylinders, although they are more like recuperators. And we just want to paint these up just to give some more visual interest. It's just two little bitty pieces, and only one of them can be seen from the top of the turret. So I think it's going to look really good down in there. As you can see, that is really shiny. But that'll dull up a little bit when we use our flat clear coat. So now we need to come in with our khaki. That's the, to me, a khaki. And paint up these pads that are on the underside of the hatches. So these are the hatches for the driver and the assistant driver. And each one of these hatches is a 2-piece hatch. That's a lot of hatches. So anyway, so that's 4 pads that we need to paint up here on our hatches. Woo, boy. My hatch math is working overtime. So, now we're going to go ahead and weather these up just like we did on the interior, but we'll do that in the next video. We also have these pads along the top edge of the turret, and so those are supposed to be painted up khaki as well, and so we're just going to paint those up. And of course, this is to me a paint which you have to be careful with when you're brush painting it. So now we're going to use Model Master Acryl Wood, and I really love this color. When I run out of it, I don't know what I'm going to do. We're going to use this on all of the wooden handles for all of our tools. And I know there are some people out there that's going to say, you know, these tools are supposed to be the same color as the vehicle. And to that, I will tell you that, yes, I know that. But like most people, I like to have something to look at other than just everything green. So I'm going to paint mine wood. So, it's your model. Have fun. Paint it your way. So the next thing we're going to do is go back to our Panzer Gray, which is our new flat black. And we're going to paint all the metal portions of our tools. That's our shovel head. Here, the pry bar. I also painted the ends of the cleaning rod for our main armament. And also our axe and our shovel as well. And what I like about this Panzer Gray is it really takes dry brushing well, and the color that I use, the flat steel, for showing wear on these really shows up and looks nice. Next is Metallic Gray XF56, which I'm going to use for the headlights. Now you can use a brighter silver color if you like. I kind of want the headlights subdued. So I'm going to use this darker color. Now this is the same color I used on the drive sprockets as well. Now I'm going to take this oil paint. This is burnt umber. And I put the pigment on a piece of cardboard. And I probably should have mentioned earlier that I started this quite a few hours ago. But we're going to use enamel thinner as a carrier for it. And what we want is just to pick out the pigments. And we're going to brush this over our wood color, as you can see here. And this is going to allow us to come back in with a little bit of thinner on a clean brush and make this look like wood grain. You may like it dark. I kind of like this dark look myself, but if you want a little lighter, just a little bit of thinner, wipe it very gently until you get the look that you like. Now I'm going to take this Model Master Acrylic Rust. Now this is the same rust that we painted our tracks, but I'm going to paint this little exhaust pipe right here from our APU. At least I believe it's from the APU, so if I'm wrong, correct me, but I'm pretty sure it's going to get rusty. So, next we need a little bit of red. This is an acrylic red from Model Master as well. And we are going to paint just the top lens of our tail light. Now this is a very small lens, so you have to be very careful. And if you get a little bit out and you don't color inside the lines, that's okay, guys. You can come back in with your base color and clean that up. And I had almost forgot about our spare tracks. So I'm going to go back to our Panzer Gray. and blacken these tracks back in, and then we'll do some weathering on them in our weathering portion of this build. So we still have a lot of work to do on this vehicle. We've got our stowage to do, get that all painted up, and then we've got our weathering to do, and get that all done before we're ready for our final reveal. So in our next video, we'll be working on our stowage, and then also final assembly of the vehicle. As you know, vehicles with interior parts, assembly is kind of all the time. You know, you get things painted up and you assemble what you can when you can. So that will end it for this particular video. Now, if you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. It's free, it doesn't cost anything, and hit that notification bell so that you'll be notified as soon as I post a new update. And for all my subscribers, thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate you. And leave me a comment, guys. Let me know what you think of the video. Also, let me know what you thought of that canvas on the mantlet. I'm really interested in what you guys think that looks like. And so, until the next video, guys, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.